Welcome to Smart Architectural Programming. Proper file handling in Python. Closing files safely.
My name is Mohammed, and quoting alongside me is
George, and today we'll be going over proper file handling in Python. You can take it, Mohammed.
so. Before we get to the meat of the issue, that is how the methods through which we can close a file, a lot of you would be wondering, why do we need to actually close a file that we open in Python? Just to give you some basic background on the issue. So, uh, the necessity of closing files properly after we finished working is to make sure that we release resources, system resources, data does not get corrupted. So if you open a file potentially and do not close it properly, A, it occupies certain memory slots and memory spaces within your computer, and those memory spaces would not be released until you explicitly tell your code to release those memory spaces, and to do so, you need a file telling done with that particular file, and now you can empty out those memories. B, if you do not explicitly close the file, there's a high degree of chance that your data gets corrupted. Um, uh, corrupted. So the best way to the best way to move forward when you're dealing with file operations in Python or any other program, make sure you close the file properly. Uh, so there are several ways to handle file closures, including the close method, you explicitly or utilizing context manager. So we'll start with probably the most easiest and simplest and the straightforward method to close files. That is using the close method. So this is probably the most, if you took a basic introduction into file operations within Python, these are the three things that we taught an open method that opens a file on line 2 called example.txt within write mode. And then on line 5, it uses file.write method to uh, to write hello world within that example.txt file. And on line 8, it uses file.close method to close the file. This is probably the most simplest and easiest way you can go about this entire process of file operations. But while, as with all of our previous videos, you over 3 different methods, and it is mainly to expose you to the different situations. But at the same time, in certain cases, like this case in particular, it is probably might be the easiest way to go with the most direct approach, but it is probably not the most optimal way of going about doing that particular activity in Python that way. And this is probably not an optimal way to go about doing that, because first of all, you'll probably not be dealing with one or two files when you're dealing with code bases which have thousands of lines of code within them. So you might, in some cases, forget to close one or two files, and again, this creates creates problems for your entire project. So the second method, using the uh, uh, with keyword, is probably something that does away with that problem in particular. So to do that, we use a context manager to open and automatically close the file. So if you look at this piece of code on my screen right now, this is using the with statement to open a file. We're using with on line 2, open method to open the file example.txt, and we're opening it on read mode as a file. Now, you notice that this creates a block of code in Python. This is a block of code in Python. Within the block, we do file.read and print data. Now, the advantage of this method is that anything that you write within the block gets executed, keeping in context that the file has been opened. But as soon as the block of code within this with block of code runs completely, the file automatically closes. Now, I raised an issue talking about that this most straightforward method was using the open action and close method that we discussed in the previous file that we were going over. But that created a very important issue that when you're dealing with thousands and thousands of lines of codes and you're opening and closing probably tens or hundreds of documents roughly, you might forget closing them explicitly. Some of you might forget closing explicitly some of those documents, and that creates a problem within your code. So with the context manager, with the with statement, you don't need to explicitly remember to close the file out, and you can just easily use context managers to open the file, act upon it, and you don't need to explicitly close it, and it automatically closes. So that's a very effective way to go about file operations within Python. But this creates another major problem. The first and the second file, the first file is the most simplest and straightforward method, but it creates the problem of closing each file every time you open that file. The second does away with the closing every file that you open problem, but at the same time, both of these code bases have another problem. Let's say the file was not there, the file was corrupted, or for any reason, an error pops up when you're trying to open the file. What do you do then? Your code would crash. And if for many of the viewers who have seen our previous videos, you'll notice we use try except blocks to do away with that error, to make sure the code runs even if an error is raised. We'll do the same thing. Now, this probably the method, the try, except, and finally blocks that we're going to use are probably one of the most, compared to these two methods that we just went over, a little more detailed, a little more complicated, but it is the most optimal way of going about the process of opening and doing file operations within Python and making sure that your code is safe, it runs, and it handles errors properly, and you don't forget closing the file out as well. So we go to the third method, which is using try, except, and finally blocks. So with try and except blocks, quite simply, the try block, any code within the try block, the Python tries to run that code. If that code doesn't run due to some error, it catches that error within the except block, and that is all about all you need to know about try and except blocks. There's an additional block to the try except blocks, which is called the finally block. So what the finally block does is that regardless of whether the try block runs or except block runs, it's going to, the finally blocks is going to run always. I mean, regardless of what happens, the finally block you can assume would run in all circumstances. So what this does is, within the finally block, we close the file out, right? So regardless whether the try block runs or the except block runs, we release the resources on the computer and we make sure the file doesn't get corrupted that we're opening. So we close the file within the finally block, which always runs. Now, the issue of that error that we were talking about before is handled within the except block. So when we try to open the file within the try block on lines 2 to 5, if any sort of error pops up, we handle that within the except block, making sure that the code keeps on running regardless of whether the error comes in or not. So the reason why this is the most optimal method is it stops the code from crashing or getting interrupted, and makes sure that the file is always closed. So this is probably the optimal way that you need to learn how to open and close files within Python, and basically the method that's probably used in most professional environments. Now that we've gone over the most straightforward method, we've gone over the reasons why most people don't use that, the context manager with the with statement method, again, gone over that, how it eliminates the weakness of the most straightforward method, which is the close method. But it raises another issue, which is it doesn't handle errors. And now we've gone over the exception handling method, where we handle exception or errors as well as close the file always. With that, we'll wrap up this video. At the end of this video, would you like to add anything, George?
No, I think you covered everything, Mohammed. Great work. And if you guys have any, suggestions for upcoming videos, please just put it in the comment section. And I think that's it. Thanks, Mohammed. Thanks, guys.